Hello, everybody. And as promised, I've done a little research about 23andMe. Let me go through some of the other details of this week before, and then this will be a bit long of a movie because I have some other things to tell you about 23andMe. So that's one. The second thing is that remember you have a job search cover letter due at the end of this module, and I want to see what company you're picking by this Wednesday. And that would be the 18th. And so you can look at the job search sites at the end of the lecture guide. You can look directly at company websites like ones we've studied, Bayer, Genentech, Amyris, 23andMe, and in the news item, there's a list of some other ones, and I'm also going to try to attach a PDF from a colleague that collected a bunch of other sort of lower level jobs that you could probably be qualified for right away. So tell me which actual job posting you are applying to by this Wednesday, the 18th. Also, just to remember, there are other normal assignments. This is a double module, so you've got two discussions. One, I hope you did already, to do this Sunday as normal. There's an assignment that happens to be due at the end of this section of modules, and then there are two quizzes, which are both, they kind of fit at the end of all the lectures, so they're both due this Sunday. Okay, so that's the assignment stuff, and now let's talk briefly about the 23andMe. In this news item, I have a couple of links. One summarizes a lot of what I'm about to tell you. I'll tell you a little more than that. And it's an article from Gizmodo. And the other thing I think is interesting, I put the link to the FDA warning letter because we talked about that a little bit. It's a big deal to get a warning letter. It means the FDA wants to shut down something you're doing because you violated a rule. And it's interesting to read the warning letter about a company that we've been discussing. So you can read that. It's very interesting. I'm not going to test you on it, but I think it's worth reading to see what the real deal is. This isn't just stuff we're talking about. It's real. So what's going on with 23andMe? Main point, it's still the company we talk about in lecture. It hasn't changed much at all, but it's gone through some development. The original tests tested like 250 different possible disease risk alleles in the genetics of the clients, and now there are only 36 medical tests available. So what's the deal? Well, the FDA intervened for actually an ethical reason. 23andMe reported risk factors for genetically related disease phenotypes, and the relative risk was not necessarily super well agreed upon in the broad scientific community, so that was one reason. And two, this was the FDA's bigger point, is that the public may not understand what it means, what relative risk means very well, and the consumers, like you or me, could make unwise medical decisions based on misinterpretation of results. And the FDA's contention was that there should be a certified clinician, like an MD or something, to help people interpret those results, and not that the customers should get the results directly. Now, the ancestry piece was always allowed because that's not part of the FDA's mission, right? Just health things are in the FDA's mission, safety and efficacy. So the 23andMe company put in a new application for their drug, and 36 have been approved. One got approved, and then they used that sort of as a template for the other 35. And 23andMe isn't going to tell you back that you have a particular risk of getting the disease in your lifetime. That is still not allowed. But they will tell back you are a carrier for a version of a gene that you could pass on to your child, and that version of the gene has increased risk of disease, whatever. And so, well, they're not telling you directly your risk, they are telling you you have a risky allele that you could pass down to your children. So that's the kind of current situation with what they can tell you about your genetic proclivity to diseases. And here's the big deal. One, FDA is certain that genetic testing is in its regulatory regime purview, right? They're in charge. They decided that. Second important point, biotech business, in this case 23andMe, was definitely at risk of going down because it didn't comply with the FDA. And so complying with the regulations is a huge, huge deal, and a company can disappear like that if it doesn't comply. The FDA can shut you down. So here's the final big picture. The original position, like I said, was that the FDA said that we needed licensed practitioners, something like an MD or a genetic counselor, to interpret the information that's provided, the genetic information that's provided. 23andMe's big contention, if you read some of those attached articles, the founder, she feels strongly that no, consumers can understand the information themselves and make their own genetic decisions. That was 23andMe's contention. The FDA came around a little bit. They said, okay, we can provide this information direct to consumers, but you have to prove to us that the consumers can understand your labeling. And that's actually very consistent with the FDA's policies, that labels have to be clear and accurate and say exactly true, proven things about the medicine or the treatment. And so 23andMe actually did some tests with their labels to show that the typical consumer would indeed be able to understand the information provided accurately. So that's a big deal. So it kind of blended some of the hardcore FDA positions with the idea of this company of kind of empowering the consumer to make their own genetic decisions. Other things that I just wanted to point out about this whole case. One is that medical doctors do really seem to agree that genetic information is way valuable. 98% in some survey said that this was true. But then it turns out that only 10% of doctors in that same survey know what to do when they get genetic information. So 23andMe argues that they're filling a market gap. It's like they're providing information and helping consumers help the doctors figure out what to do with that information. So there is a big gap, and maybe everybody acknowledges that. The last piece is that this case was reported widely. There's one article I found in Forbes magazine. Forbes is a business journal, and it's because this is big money and people want to know where to invest. Another big thing is that 23andMe is collaborating with a number of drug development companies, the biotech companies that we've been talking about. One, they're collaborating with Genentech about Parkinson's targets. They're cooperating with Pfizer about lupus research, and they plan, this is their business model, is to collaborate with lots of drug development companies to try to target drugs to various genetically determined diseases. And interesting. So when you sign up for 23andMe, you fill out a big survey, like you would do at the doctor, lots of health questions. And they actually, in their contracts with places like Genentech and Pfizer, sell that massive information, or at least collaborate around that information, much like Facebook might sell your information to other advertising companies or something like that. So you can see why a big company would want to know about the genetics of the population as a whole, and how that could help them develop drug targets, right? We know about different versions of genes interact with drugs differently, right? From our cancer study just last module. But you also are like, wait a second, if I sign up for this, some company is going to know all this other information about my health? Yes. And so this is the perfect example for us this week, right? There's some ethical questions like, should they sell our data? Should they share our data? Should this one company collaborate with another company? Those are ethical questions. But there's also some scientific questions, aren't there? What exactly are the genetic studies that are proven? How exactly do these kits work? Those are very scientific questions, and they're paired along with some very ethical questions. So even though this is a little confusing because it's changed over the years, I think it's the perfect example of thinking about the ethics and society and regulations that go along with biotech. And so I hope you'll stay paying attention to the 23andMe story, because it really, encompasses just almost everything we've learned this semester, and I think it's a great story. So I hope you enjoy thinking about it, and I look forward to hearing what job you want to apply to. All right, talk to you soon.